So they do some movement. They actually get back up into their positions to where they were, actually to where Ginge had been when he had been killed. Going back to the book, we turned around to where Ginge had lain and walked back from the skyline to find the gap through which Sergeant P had led us. In this way, we avoided being seen from Tumbledown. On the ground, I saw bits of clothing and flesh. Everywhere resembled a slaughter yard. We walked down 10 meters or so, and there was more and more. Stuck on the side of a rock was clearly a large piece. Johnny and I moved closer to it, and my stomach churned as I saw the nose and cheek of a face. We looked at each other, our eyes wide. I put my bayonet under the flesh and flicked it to the ground before burying it quickly. Neither of us spoke. I had no doubts, and Pete M. confirmed to me that this was the remains of a mate. Pete told me later that he had died instantly, for only the waist down remained. I felt gutted beyond belief. I had been told of the direct hit that had also killed 2 others. To see it with my own eyes, the body and remains, was another story. Walking over the crest, we bumped into Pat Harley. With him were 1 or 2 others, although I no longer remember who they were. As I was talking to Pat, I noticed a helmet on the end of an SLR planted in the rock face. Nodding towards this, Pat mentioned that he had come up and found Geordie Lang dead. We rounded the rock face, and at our feet lay Doc and Geordie, both on their backs. They had died in an open space, with the infamous Tumbledown looking down on them. Geordie had died trying to save Doc. The bastard sniper had caught him in the open as he reached him. Geordie lay with his mouth slightly open. Gunshot wounds to his chest and stomach meant he died quickly. Evidence around him showed that he had tried to reach Doc. Had he been calling for help himself? Pat, looking cut up, took Geordie's fags, saying he'd want us to have these rather than the rear echelon. We turned our attention to Doc, who was more depressing. Doc hadn't died quickly. He must, in fact, have been fully aware of his injuries. The top part of his skull was blown away, the brain visible, smashed by a sniper's bullet. Only the fragmented skull had prevented the complete collapse of the side of his head. How he survived the impact, God knows. Laying beside him were items from the first aid kit he'd been carrying. A field dressing, half open, safety pins in his right hand fingers near the ground. His left hand held a morphine syringe. This had been used, the thin needle pointed towards him. It must have been his dying act. His radio mic was still attached to his throat. A close friend told me many months later, Doc fell on his radio. The sending switch was stuck, and he was on permanent send to all of us. We could hear him gurgling and moaning as he became aware that he had been shot badly. Vince and sent the Siglers nuts, but we were all helpless. The sniper picked at anyone that moved. Geordie tried and lost his life for it. We eventually had to turn on to the emergency frequency to establish communications again. Doc had remained conscious and eventually died on a part of that mountain, alone with a lad who had bravely tried to rescue him. So, just to explain that, you know, you have what's called a push to talk button on your radio.
Yeah.
And however he fell and landed on that push to talk, so that he was broadcasting his death, and his dying was broadcast over the network for everyone to hear.